Have you ever met someone who seemed unusually intelligent? Not just academically, but emotionally? The kind of person who notices things everyone else misses. They read a room in seconds. They sense tension before anyone says a word. They can predict people's reactions with unsettling accuracy. Most people assume these abilities are natural gifts, something they were simply born with. But psychology tells a far more uncomfortable story. For many highly intelligent people, these abilities didn't develop because life was easy. They developed because life demanded them. Sometimes, intelligence is not the product of comfort. Sometimes, it is the product of survival. Imagine a child growing up in a home where peace never lasted very long, where the atmosphere could change without warning, where one conversation could end in laughter and the next in silence. That child quickly learns something most children never have to think about. Safety depends on paying attention. Every facial expression matters. Every change in tone matters. Every footstep in the hallway might mean something. While other children are learning what the world looks like, this child is learning how the world feels. And over time, that constant observation begins to reshape the brain itself. Psychologists have spent decades studying how early environments influence the developing nervous system. One of the most important discoveries is that a child's brain adapts to whatever environment it grows up in. If that environment is predictable, the brain learns curiosity. If that environment is unpredictable, the brain learns vigilance. Neither response is a choice. They are both forms of adaptation. This is why many adults who are described as exceptionally perceptive often share something unexpected: a childhood where they rarely felt completely safe. Now, this doesn't mean every intelligent person had a difficult childhood. And it certainly doesn't mean hardship automatically creates intelligence. But psychology consistently shows that challenging early environments can strengthen certain mental ability, especially emotional awareness, pattern recognition, and careful observation. The question is not whether pain makes people smarter. The question is what the brain learns when it has no choice but to adapt. To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. The brain that never stopped. Think about how most children enter a room. They run toward the toys. They laugh. They ask questions. Their attention naturally moves toward curiosity. Now imagine another child entering the exact same room. Before speaking, they quietly look at every face. They notice who seems upset, who is avoiding eye contact, who looks tired, who might become angry. They are not trying to be unusually observant. Their brain is simply following the rules it learned at home. Psychologists often describe this as hypervigilance. It is a state where the brain becomes highly sensitive to possible signs of danger. Originally, this response exists to protect us. If our ancestors failed to notice danger, they didn't survive. But when a child grows up in an emotionally unpredictable environment, that survival system can remain switched on long after the danger has passed. The result is an adult who notices almost everything, not because they are paranoid, because their nervous system learned that paying attention kept them safe. This ability often looks impressive from the outside. Friends say they're incredibly intuitive. Coworkers admire how quickly they understand people. Partners describe them as emotionally intelligent. What few people realize is that these abilities often came with a cost. Imagine being 8 years old and already knowing the difference between a tired sigh and an angry sigh, knowing whether today is a day to ask for help or a day to stay quiet, learning to predict someone's mood before they even speak. Those are remarkable skills, but they were never meant to become part of childhood. The child wasn't practicing intelligence. The child was practicing survival. Years later, the world rewards those same abilities. They become excellent leaders, great listeners, insightful friends, thoughtful partners. But inside, many of them still carry the nervous system of someone waiting for the next emotional storm. That is one of psychology's greatest paradoxes. The very abilities that help someone succeed as an adult may have been built during the moments they felt least safe as a child. And once you understand that, another question naturally appears. If the brain becomes this skilled at reading the world around it, what happens to the child who spends years forgetting to understand themselves? Why highly intelligent people often had difficult childhoods, psychology explains. Part 2. If a child spends years watching everyone else, who watches the child? This is where psychology reveals one of the most misunderstood consequences of a difficult childhood. Many highly intelligent children become experts at understanding other people's emotions before they ever learn how to understand their own. Their attention is always directed outward. Is mom okay today? Did dad sound upset? Should I stay quiet? Is something about to happen? When your brain spends years monitoring everyone else's emotional state, it has very little space left to ask a different question. How do I actually feel? Over time, this creates a fascinating contradiction. They become incredibly skilled at reading other people, but surprisingly disconnected from themselves. They learn to read people before they read. Book some. People seem to know exactly what someone is feeling without a single word being spoken. They notice hesitation, a forced smile, a pause that's just a little too long, a sentence that sounds polite but doesn't feel genuine. Others call it intuition. Psychology calls it pattern recognition. Our brains naturally search for patterns because patterns help us predict what comes next. For children growing up in stable homes, this ability develops gradually. For children growing up in unpredictable environments, it develops much faster. Imagine a child whose parents' mood changes without warning. After enough experiences, the brain starts collecting tiny pieces of information: the sound of footsteps, the way a door closes, the volume of a voice. Even silence begins to mean something. Eventually, the child doesn't consciously think about these details anymore. Their brain notices them automatically. Years later, people are amazed by how accurately they read the room. But what they're seeing isn't magic. They're seeing years of unconscious training. The irony is that this gift rarely feels like a gift to the person who has it, because when you notice everything, it's incredibly difficult to relax. Even during happy moments, part of the mind remains quietly alert, still watching, still listening, still preparing, growing up too early. There's a phrase psychologists often use: pontification. It happens when a child begins taking on emotional responsibilities that were never meant to belong to them. Sometimes they comfort a parent after an argument. Sometimes they become the peacemaker between family members. Sometimes they hide their own emotions because they don't want to create one more problem. Slowly, they stop acting like children. Not because they want to, because they believe they have to. People often compliment these children. You're so mature for your age. You're incredibly responsible. You never cause trouble. But maturity isn't always a sign that childhood went well. Sometimes it's a sign that childhood ended too soon. Many intelligent adults look back and realize they were praised for qualities they developed while trying to survive difficult circumstances. They weren't calm because life was peaceful. They were calm because they learned that expressing emotion sometimes made situations worse. They weren't independent because they wanted to be. They became independent because they felt they had no other choice. The world applauded the result. Very few people noticed the cost when intelligence becomes protection. One of the most fascinating discoveries in psychology is that the brain constantly tries to reduce uncertainty. Uncertainty feels uncomfortable, especially for someone whose childhood was unpredictable. As adults, many highly intelligent people begin using their minds as a form of protection. They analyze conversations. They prepare for problems before they happen. They imagine different outcomes, not because they enjoy overthinking, because somewhere deep inside, their nervous system still believes, if I can predict it, maybe I can prevent it. Think about someone who rereads an email 5 times before sending it, or someone who replays a conversation all night, wondering whether they said the wrong thing. From the outside, it looks like perfectionism. Underneath, it often comes from something much deeper: a desire to stay safe, the brain quietly whispers, "Don't make mistakes. Don't disappoint people. Don't give anyone a reason to reject you." That voice didn't appear overnight. For many people, it began years earlier, long before they even understood what anxiety was. The strange part is that these same people often become incredibly successful. Their attention to detail helps them excel. Their careful thinking helps them solve problems. Their emotional awareness makes them excellent friends and leaders. People admire their intelligence, but almost nobody sees the invisible work happening behind the scenes. The constant thinking, the constant scanning, the constant effort to make sure everything stays under control, because for someone whose brain learned survival first, rest can feel unfamiliar, sometimes even unsafe. And perhaps that's the greatest hidden cost of growing up this way. Not that you become intelligent, but that your mind forgets what it feels like to truly switch off. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Not everyone who had a difficult childhood becomes highly intelligent. And not every highly intelligent person experienced childhood adversity. Psychology doesn't claim either of those things. What it does suggest is something far more nuanced. When a child is repeatedly forced to adapt, the brain often develops certain abilities far earlier than it otherwise would have. The tragedy is that these strengths are often born from necessity rather than choice. Why? They struggle to trust. Many highly intelligent people don't struggle because they can't understand others. They struggle because they understand them too well. After years of observing behavior, they begin noticing patterns everywhere. They quickly recognize inconsistencies. A compliment that doesn't sound genuine, a promise that feels uncertain, someone whose words don't match their actions. Most people overlook these details. They don't. At first, this ability protects them. It helps them avoid unhealthy relationships and recognize manipulation. But over time, the same ability can become exhausting. Instead of simply enjoying a friendship, their mind quietly analyzes it. Instead of accepting kindness, they wonder if there's another motive. Instead of feeling safe, they prepare for disappointment. Not because they're negative, because experience taught them that safety could disappear without warning. Their intelligence becomes a shield. The problem is that shields don't only keep danger out. Sometimes they also keep genuine connection from getting in. The hidden exhaustion nobody sees from the outside. They often look calm, responsible, reliable, the person everyone goes to for advice. But inside, their mind is rarely quiet. Even after an ordinary conversation, they're still thinking. Did I say too much? Did they misunderstand me? Should I have handled that differently? While everyone else has moved on, their brain is still processing. Psychologists call this rumination. The tendency to replay thoughts and experiences over and over. The brain believes it's solving a problem. In reality, it's often keeping the nervous system locked in a cycle of stress. That's why some highly intelligent people feel mentally exhausted, even after a day where nothing dramatic happened. Their body rested. Their mind never did. The strength hidden beneath the pain. But this isn't where psychology leaves the story, because the same mind that learned to survive can also learn to heal. One of the brain's greatest abilities is something called neuroplasticity. It means your brain continues changing throughout your life. The patterns that once protected you are not permanent. You can teach your nervous system that not every silence means rejection. Not every disagreement means danger. Not every mistake means failure. Healing doesn't erase intelligence. It changes the reason behind it. Instead of paying attention because you're afraid, you begin paying attention because you're curious. Instead of reading every room to stay safe, you begin reading people with compassion instead of fear. The ability remains. The burden slowly fades, a different definition of intelligence. Maybe we've been measuring intelligence the wrong way all along. Perhaps intelligence isn't only about solving difficult equations, or remembering facts, or having a high IQ. Perhaps real intelligence is the ability to understand yourself without becoming trapped inside your own mind. The ability to notice patterns without assuming the worst. To remain thoughtful without becoming overwhelmed, to understand pain without allowing it to define your identity. That kind of intelligence isn't loud. It rarely seeks attention, but it quietly changes the way a person moves through the world. So, why do many highly intelligent people often have difficult childhoods? Not because suffering magically creates brilliance, and not because pain guarantees wisdom, but because the human brain is remarkably adaptable. When life becomes unpredictable, it learns to observe more carefully, to think more deeply, to anticipate more quickly. Those abilities can become extraordinary strengths in adulthood, but they often come with invisible scars that few people ever notice. If you recognize yourself in today's video, remember this. The intelligence that helped you survive yesterday doesn't have to keep carrying yesterday forever. You don't have to earn your safety by constantly analyzing everything around you. You don't have to stay emotionally prepared for storms that may never come. The child who had to stay alert deserves an adult life where peace is finally allowed. Because the greatest sign of intelligence isn't simply seeing more than everyone else. It's knowing when you can finally stop looking over your shoulder and start living in the present. Perhaps intelligence was never just about how quickly your mind could solve problems. Perhaps it was about how deeply your mind learned to adapt. If today's video resonated with you, maybe it helped explain parts of yourself that never quite made sense before. And if someone came to mind while you were watching, someone who always seems to understand everyone else, but rarely talks about themselves, consider sharing this video with them. Sometimes, understanding the psychology behind our past is the first step toward changing how we experience our future. If you enjoy exploring the hidden patterns of human behavior, emotional intelligence, and the psychology behind why we think, feel, and act the way we do, make sure you're subscribed to Psychology Origins. New videos every week explore the science of the mind in a way that's practical, relatable, and deeply human. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and remember, the goal isn't to become someone else. The goal is to understand yourself well enough that you can finally become who you were, always meant to be.